For nearly half a century, the staircase leading to the second floor of Graceland has been more than just a banister and wood. It has been a velvet rope separating the public story from a private truth. Since Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977, that upstairs realm, his bedroom, his private bathroom, and the narrow, hidden staircase to the attic above, has remained a forbidden zone. Millions of tourists have filed through the jungle room and the trophy building, pressed their hands against the cold stone of the meditation garden, and then stopped at the base of those steps. Guides always gave the same gentle answer. Out of respect for the family, the upstairs is not open to the public. But respect eventually bows to history. In the spring of 2025, 48 years after the king left the building, Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter and sole heir of the estate, made a decision her mother, Lisa Marie Presley, could never bring herself to make. She ordered the attic opened. What the archivists found inside wasn't a collection of dusty jumpsuits or forgotten gold records. It was evidence of a life being lived in secret, and the shocking presence of someone who had no right to be there. To understand the weight of this moment, you have to understand the air inside Graceland before that lock was cut. After Elvis died, his father, Vernon Presley, was paralyzed by a strange combination of grief and paranoia. Just 2 days after Elvis was buried at Forest Hill Cemetery, an attempted grave robbery sent Vernon into a panic. He moved Elvis's body and his mother Gladys's to the meditation garden at Graceland overnight under police escort. From that day on, the mansion became a fortress. The second floor, where Elvis took his last breath, was sealed. But the attic above it was an afterthought, a forgotten space that even the family rarely mentioned. By the time Graceland opened to the public in 1982, the story was fixed. The upstairs was private, a shrine to the man himself. But the attic wasn't a shrine. It was a mystery. Maintenance workers kept the air conditioning running up there for decades, even though no one was allowed inside. They followed orders from the estate without ever asking why. When Priscilla Presley managed the property, she deflected questions. When Lisa Marie took over, she grew quiet whenever the attic was mentioned. Some said it was full of Elvis's prescription records, too painful to review. Others whispered about love letters or even a hidden escape route. No one guessed the truth. Someone was already up there. The morning the attic was opened, the crew was small. Riley Keough did not attend in person, but she watched via a secure video feed from California. The lead archivist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Marian Fleetwood from the University of Memphis, later described the moment the door gave way as unlocking a tomb that wasn't meant to be a tomb. The air that rushed out was cold and stale, with an odd, sweet undertone. Old paper, old fabric, and something else she couldn't name. The attic stretched the full width of the mansion's top floor. Dormer windows, covered in black, fell to block out the Memphis sun. Boxes were stacked in neat, labeled rows. Tupelo, Army, Hollywood, Vegas, and Comeback. Elvis had organized his own history, like a museum curator. But in the far corner, behind a freestanding wardrobe that had been pushed against the wall, they found a space that wasn't on any blueprint. A small, almost invisible door led to a secondary crawl space, no taller than 4 feet. Inside, curled on a thin mattress covered in a 1970s-era floral sheet, was a man. He was not a ghost. He was not a stranger. The archivists initially thought they had discovered an intruder, a squatter who had somehow lived undetected for decades. But the man was too frail to be a threat. He was elderly, with paper-thin skin and a face obscured by a long, unkempt white beard. He wore a faded bathrobe that might once have been maroon. When Dr. Fleetwood shone her light on him, he flinched and raised a trembling hand to shield his eyes. Then he spoke. His voice was a dry rasp, barely a whisper, but it carried an accent that was unmistakable, a soft, southern drawl that sounded like it had been recorded on old vinyl. "Took you long enough," he said. The man did not claim to be Elvis Presley. Instead, he said his name was Samuel, and that he had been hiding in Graceland's attic for 48 years. But when the archivists ran his fingerprints through a federal database, something they were authorized to do given the potential security breach, the results came back with a red flag. Samuel did not exist. No birth certificate, no driver's license, no social security number. He was, officially, a living blank space. The story that emerged over the following days was more heartbreaking than any conspiracy theory. Samuel was not a crazed fan who had broken in. According to handwritten journals found next to his mattress, journals written in a shaky but educated hand, he had been a groundskeeper at Graceland in the early 1970s. He had been hired by Vernon Presley himself, a quiet man with a troubled past who had served a stint in prison for forgery. Samuel claimed that in 1975, he had witnessed something he was never supposed to see: a late-night meeting in the meditation garden between Elvis and a Memphis politician, an exchange of cash for a favor that would have destroyed careers. Samuel said he was told to disappear, or worse. Instead, he hid. When Elvis died in 1977, the chaos gave him an opportunity. The attic was already sealed. The staff who knew him had been let go. He simply walked up the back service stairs one night, pulled the wardrobe across the secondary door, and never came out. For 48 years, he survived on food and water he collected during the dead of night, moving like a shadow through the mansion's least visited corners. He knew the cleaning schedules. He knew which floorboards creaked. He knew that the Graceland maintenance crew, out of habit or loyalty, kept the attic's air conditioner running and never questioned the small deliveries of bottled water and canned goods that someone, perhaps an old friend who had also kept quiet, left at the top of the service stairs once a month. But the most shocking detail was yet to come. Among Samuel's possessions was a small lockbox, its combination worn smooth by decades of anxious fingers. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a series of photographs and a single audio cassette tape. The photographs showed Elvis Presley and Samuel together in the late 1960s, not as master and servant, but as equals, laughing on the back porch of Graceland. On the reverse of one photo, in Elvis's own handwriting, verified later by multiple document experts, was a note. "Sam saved my life once. I owe him everything. He stays as long as he needs." The cassette tape was even more startling. It was a recording of a conversation dated October 1976, less than a year before Elvis died. On it, Elvis can be heard discussing his own fears about his health, his frustration with his doctor, and his growing belief that people around him were more interested in his money than his survival. But the most haunting moment comes at the end. Elvis says, "If I don't make it, Sam, you know where to go. They'll never find you up there. And when they do, make sure they hear this." Then a pause. "I'm not the king up here. I'm just a man who got trapped." The revelation that a living man had been hiding in Elvis's attic for nearly 5 decades sent shockwaves through the media. Tabloids initially ran with headlines screaming about a secret brother or a long-lost twin. But the truth was both sadder and more profound. Samuel was not a member of the Presley family. He was a witness to a side of Elvis that the official history had erased, the paranoid, exhausted, deeply lonely man who trusted almost no one. Samuel had kept Elvis's secrets not out of fear, but out of loyalty. He had stayed in that cramped, dark space because Elvis had asked him to. And after Elvis died, Samuel had no reason to leave. He had no identity, no family, no life outside the walls of Graceland. The mansion became his prison and his sanctuary. When Riley Keough learned the full story, she reportedly wept. In a public statement released through the estate, she said, "My grandfather was a man of profound contradictions. He gave everything to the world, but he kept very little for himself. What we found in the attic isn't a scandal. It's a reminder that the people we put on pedestals are often the loneliest people in the room." Samuel was removed from the attic and taken to a private medical facility. He was malnourished and suffering from advanced arthritis, but his mind remained sharp. When asked why he never simply walked out the front door, he gave a simple answer. "Where would I go? Out there, I'm nobody. Up there, I was keeping a promise." The Presley estate has since announced that Samuel will be provided with housing and care for the rest of his life, in recognition of his decades of silence and suffering. The attic itself is now being preserved as a historical space, not for its glittering artifacts, but for its raw, uncomfortable humanity. The boxes of Elvis's personal effects will eventually be cataloged and displayed, but the secondary crawl space will be left exactly as it was found. A small, dark room where a man hid for 48 years, not from the law, but from a world that had no place for him once his king was gone. As for the conspiracy theories that have swirled around Elvis's death for decades, the sightings, the fake grave, the supposed man on the moon, the opening of the attic did not end them. If anything, it added a new layer. Because if a man could live undetected inside Graceland for 48 years, what else might still be hidden? The shocking presence in the attic was not Elvis himself, returning from the dead. It was something perhaps more unsettling. Proof that the people Elvis trusted most were willing to spend their entire lives in the shadows, just to protect a memory. And that, more than any jumpsuit or gold record, is the real legacy of the king. He didn't just leave behind music. He left behind a human being, tucked away in the rafters, waiting for a door to open.